Our country is so wonderful, so great. Our culture is so dynamic, so powerful, so potent that it is a solvent that actually causes people to become more Western, no matter who they are if they come here. And that includes Muslims.
Instead of conflict and aggression, here's governance built on grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. If the subject is Muslim immigrants to America, there's a lot of hysteria. And let's be blunt, there's been Islamic terrorism. And people are pointing stories in Europe about how the culture is being overrun there. And of course, this is Gracearchy, where we believe humans should be judged individually. Some surprising new research shows us how you can stop worrying about Muslims in America. Jim, I know you want to make 4 points about this, and I'm excited because personal experience, maybe, and very eager to see where we're going to go here.
Yeah, and by the way, my last point is going to touch a little bit on your personal experience. You're already going to know the lesson that we're going to provide at the end, but I do want to make 4 points as we're here today. And I want to say up front, first, I'm a Christian, okay? So in the great battle of history about whether or not the Muslims or the Christians are right, which crusade side should have won the Crusades, I clearly am a Christian, okay? And so that's important because I think the position I'm going to present should be the majority Christian position, and it's not. So that's number one. Two, I am directly inspired by Daryl Davis.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
We've done 2 episodes with Daryl. Part 1 and part 2. I sat down and had an interview with them, and we will provide the links to the Daryl Davis interview in the show notes for wherever you're on, whatever platform you're tuning into this show. And it's important to say that because Daryl Davis literally sits down with people who are hateful. And I do not believe that that is necessarily the Muslim position, right? That maybe they have some views that shock many Western sensibilities, but it is not the case that they are necessarily hateful. Now, there are some that are, and we definitely have to acknowledge this. You did it just a moment ago as you were entering the show. I'm not naive or unaware of these things, nor is Daryl, who sits down with people who hate black people. They're members of the Klan or they're neo-Nazis or whatever, and he gets them to change from where they're at. And he's had massive success over the decades doing this. And you can find Daryl all over the place on YouTube and other videos. There's documentaries about him. I have to say, our interview ranks. Like, we did a really good job of getting him to tell how he came to be who he is, and then what the techniques and tools are for what he does. Those were the 2 episodes. And so my thinking, he's almost like a patron saint to this show. My thinking, as I approach this issue today, has some Daryl Davis in it.
You know, it has more than that, because I love that you identified as a Christian. I'm not sure if I am or not anymore, but I'm working on it. But the one thing that I do agree with about the way that Jesus showed us to influence each other is that it's one-to-one. And Daryl Davis is doing that one-to-oneness. He's not trying to make some big, massive thing happen. A big, massive thing is happening because he has done it one at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And he gives the lessons for how to do, if you want to do something similar, how to do that. But there's a psychology and a philosophy to what he's doing. There's a direct paradigm.
Yes.
And I am firmly planted in that camp, not the one that says we have to fight and kill and hate, but the one that says, no, we have to listen and love.
Yes.
So I expect messages on this one. I expect that people are not going to like what we have to say. So I want to narrow the confines here. I want to tell you up front, we are not talking about immigration. We are not talking about Muslim immigration. We are not talking about terrorism and Sharia law and 100 other things. There's a lot that could go into this issue. What I suspect is going to happen, I can't say this for sure because I can't predict the future, is that probably sometime later in the summer, we're going to have a guest on who is Muslim. And if you have questions or pushback, that's fine. Give it to us. Share your opinion. Maybe we could take some of those questions to him if we can schedule this interview later this summer. I would be very interested in doing that. I have a libertarian Muslim acquaintance, and I want to bring him to this show. So we're going to see if we can make that happen. I'm hoping to see him in June. So I'm going to see if we can make that happen. So I do welcome the messages, but I want to let everybody know we're basically talking about U.S. immigration or migration of Muslims and their ability to assimilate very specifically. The real topic of this show has to do with whether or not they are a threat that refuses to assimilate. So all the other areas that you may want to bring up, it wasn't the point of this very short episode to cover this from soup to nuts, every aspect of this. A lot of the objections people are going to be prone to raise are going to not be involved anything we say out loud. I just know this in advance, that they're going to come back at us with things that I wasn't even attempting to address. They're going to be like, yeah, but. And if your mind turns into that, yeah, but, go ahead and write it. But just know, I'm aware you did a yeah, but. You didn't actually listen to what I said. You did a yeah, but. And we'll try to address it if I can have my friend come on later this summer.
I like it. And by the way, welcome those kinds of comments. Anything that gets your back up that you want to share, that's part of the conversation here. And you're in a place where grace is extended. So we're not going to come back at you with guns blazing. We're going to listen to you and ask you to explain. Because we want to know. We really want to know where you're coming from. Okay, let's get into this. What's the first point here? Okay, first point is stop bombing and regime change.
Yeah. Okay, so the Middle East has been broken by constant interference from outside. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on anti-intervention discussion today, but I just want to say that every single intervention has somehow or other managed to worsen the problem. You know, there's people who are putting up videos right now of Iran and showing what a modern hit place it had become by the 1970s before the coup, the Shah's departure, and the arrival of the Ayatollah. And they think that they're making some really like super valid point about like, oh, look at how bad radical Islam is. Well, there's been intervention in that region of the world, and it has made the place less Christian over time. It's driven out Christians and Jews from many of these places. It has led to ISIS and very caustic, abrasive, fundamentalist, totalitarian situations. And if I wanted to just make the point simple, I would say that all this intervention has had a radicalizing effect. It has caused people to lose economic opportunity, see devastation around them, lose family members and friends, and they have in turn done what a lot of people do under duress. They've turned to religion. And the type of religion they're going to turn to under those circumstances is not going to be positive, affirming, peace-oriented religion. It's going to be the one that tells them that God is on their side and punishment is in order. Yeah. So Egypt is not what it once was under Nasser in a lot of ways, and Iran is nowhere near what it once was. And there's different countries where they have actually regressed, and it has happened while this domino of nations has been toppled. And some of this has happened, a lot of this has happened in the last 30 years.
Yeah, easily within our lifetimes.
Yeah, so I just want to say, if we stop the bombing and the regime change, now this may mean that they get into bloody conflicts with each other, and this may mean some bad stuff happens in the meantime. And some of the reasons stuff was happening in the 1970s and before had to do with the Cold War. But we're not in the Cold War anymore. And there's people who want there to be a Cold War. They want Islam to be the enemy because it's good for business. A lot of them have zip codes that are directly in driving range of Washington, D.C. They make a lot of money off of war, folks. There is a military-industrial complex. But I want to say we have this area has become more radical over time, not less, because of intervention by Western nations. They need to sort these things out. And the trend is that they will choose a more liberal path, by and large, when they're able to do so. And that's what Iran shows when you show these 1970s videos.
Second point is, we are not Europe. That is, America isn't Europe.
You shouldn't have to say something so obvious. But this is the argument that is being made. Well, I'm aware that this argument's out there that young Muslim men have moved in large numbers and begun to occupy areas all the way up to Ireland, and that this is causing cultural war in these places, that there is actually real issues that are coming up from these situations. I want to say, and I think it's a very, very important takeaway, We're not Europe. We don't have anything like what Europe's experiencing right now. But there's a reason Europe is experiencing, there's one big reason Europe is experiencing what they're experiencing right now, is that these are refugees. These are people who have fled an area, probably for economic opportunity, but they have left, they've been pushed out, or they've chosen to leave, and they've gone somewhere else. And what they did is they just migrated out of Asia, out of Africa, up into Europe. And if the Western interference in those areas wasn't happening, then this would be less likely to be true as well. There's a reason they've moved. So if you lived in some kind of paradise before, or you thought things were improving, by and large, and you had opportunity, you wouldn't have taken that opportunity to move. But you shouldn't have to say we're not Europe. You just shouldn't have to say it. I know Bernie Sanders, in the 2010s was constantly, and everybody in the progressive left was saying, well, Europe has this and Europe has that. They got free healthcare and it's all so great. They're constantly comparing us to them. But I want to focus in on why this can be misleading with an analogy. So right before lockdowns began for the worldwide sickness in 2020, there were a lot of people looking at Italy. And Italy had a hospital shortage. They didn't have enough beds and they didn't have enough respirators. And people were coming in and overcrowding and they were in the hallways and they were dying. But the health picture, the hospital picture, all radically different in Italy from the United States.
Sure.
Brooklyn came closest here in the United States to being like Italy, but no other city did. I don't know if you remember, they were building mobile hospitals. They were setting up MASH units outside. In New York Harbor, they had a boat. In Washington State, they built an entire tent building.
Yep.
Right? There was also, none of it was ever used. It wasn't used. They didn't need it. We have more hospital capacity and beds here because we have market. Their system is entirely socialist. They didn't have the capacity to handle this. They have a much higher rate of lung disease in Italy. There's a much higher rate of smoking, right? So if you have a respiratory disease show up, that could be really devastating. And we were looking at that situation. I know a doctor personally who was very impacted by this that thought we needed to really lock down hard because they were looking at Italy. But Italy is not the United States. The conditions there are different. And there are conditions that are different, including how they handle religion. So I just want to say, I don't think there's any chance that we have of being in that same position. Any chance is too strong. That's definitely too strong. We have very low chance of coming like Europe because we are fundamentally different. But that's not the end of the story.
This show is brought to you by the Zero Aggression Project. Zap newsletter subscribers get alerts when each episode is released. The Zap website is also the pathway by which you can contact us by email and support the show. This program operates thanks to tax-deductible Zap contributions, and we appreciate your support. So, zap the state, and have a nice day.
I think it's even more than that. So, Mustafa Akyol tells this great story. It's just fantastic.
So I have to ask, who is this guy?
He is a Cato scholar, and he happens to be Muslim.
Okay.
And I just want to read what he said because it's just so great. Someday in 2013, I got on a plane from Riyadh to Istanbul. What made the otherwise unmemorable flight rather memorable was the dress code of the female passengers that changed dramatically from departure to destination. In Riyadh, they all boarded on the planes covered from head to toe. When the plane approached Istanbul, however, I noticed that some of these same women walked back to the lavatory and emerged dressed in a very different fashion. One woman, I can say, was wearing one of the shortest mini skirts I'd ever seen. Apparently, she was ready to party in Istanbul's famous nightclubs. So here's people traveling, and they come from one place where they have to follow the law, and then they leave that place and come to another place, and their behavior is markedly different and much more Western, much more what you would recognize. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about that in a moment, but I just want to say I think there's a human nature component here that is more powerful than the law itself, and that especially includes Sharia law.
All right, the de-radicalizing solvent of U.S. immigration. We weren't going to talk about immigration, but we're going to talk about this.
Well, we're going to talk about assimilation really here. And this is the most important point of the entire broadcast. Like, I want you to understand there's a brand new study out that includes a lot of important information. We're only going to gloss the surface of it, but it shows that not only is the United States different from Europe, because it is, but people coming here who are Muslim, oh my gosh, it westernizes them better than any place else. They do assimilate. They do become part of American culture, and probably so dramatically so it would shock you. It did me when I read this report. So I want to just give you some highlights. Now, the report I'm speaking of comes from the Cato Institute. The author is David J. Bier, B-I-E-R. We will put the link to this article in the show notes. It's a summary of his findings. The title of it, Muslim immigrants assimilate even more than the polls of Muslims indicate. So this is about assimilation, and the United States is a remarkable solvent. It is a westernizing. Our culture gets exported all over the world and people grab it. And this has been especially true in Iran, frankly. That's why the Ayatollahs call us the Great Satan, by the way. It had nothing to do with hatred for Americans. That's not what this was about. They think we're corrupt. These religious leaders do, because of the types of movies and entertainment and music and stuff that we have. But that stuff's really popular over there. They watch our TV shows. Okay. So I just want to share 3 quick findings, and I want to kind of put the cookies on the lowest shelf of what Bier had to say. Number 1, the polls about Muslims tend to miss a big group of people. So I'm going to ask you to imagine it this way. You want to know what the kids in a given school think about hot dogs. Hot dogs. But you only ask the kids who still go to that school. Some kids have left the school, and those kids actually liked hot dogs more than the ones who stayed. So if you ignore the kids who left, you'll actually think the kids love hot dogs, even though that might not really be true. This is what's happening here. Same type of things happening. Most people raised Muslim in the US. It's a lot of people. There's a lot of people. It's not quite most, but it's a lot. Leave Islam. It's a very high percentage that the next generation says, I'm walking away. Very high. Then on top of that, the ones that do, that next generation, even the ones that stay Islam, but especially the ones who leave it, become more liberal than the US population at large. Now, by liberal, I mean free, okay? Adopting Western values of natural rights and so forth, and
does
the
that
autonomy
translate
of the individual.
Into votes, or is it just big L?
Well, we're going to give you, let's go for the, let me make my final point, and I'll give you a direct answer to that question. Polls often just simply don't count Muslims anymore. Just like the hot dog example. If somebody is now a former Muslim, they don't count them as Muslim anymore. But they left Islam, so this is part of the assimilation that occurred in coming to the United States and living here, especially, again, with successive generations. It's already the case. Almost all the immigration of Islam has happened here in this century. And that makes sense because we've been doing quite a bit over there since 9/11. 1 in 4 people raised Muslim have left Islam, Bier writes on X, which means that all polls of Muslim opinion substantially understate the degree of Muslim immigrant assimilation since leaving Islam is a type of assimilation. So the result is that Muslims may look less assimilated than they really are. Okay? So the second point, people change over time a lot. And we're talking here now about the kids of immigrants. So the parents might keep the old ways, but their kids grow up in the new country and begin to think a lot like the people who live here. And that's been true of immigration historically across the board. And it turns out we have the data now to say it is happening already, even though most of that immigration has happened in the last 25 years, to say that it's happening already. First generation immigrants are more traditional in Islamic families, but their children are much more accepting and similar to Americans. And the issue that they tested here comes up in our third point. So I'm going to answer your question, Bill.
Yeah.
Muslims in the U.S. are already very different from Muslims in other countries. In many Muslim majority countries, about 1 in 4 people accept homosexuality. I'm surprised the number is even that high. But in the US, about 1 in 2 people raised Muslim accept it. So in other words, it goes from 25 to 50% acceptance. That's a big dramatic leap. That's the position in the United States. And then we know, again, if they leave Islam, we know that that number goes even higher. It starts to peak up close to 80% of those Muslims. So the ones that leave, they are really, really likely to be liberal. And homosexuality is a key way that this was measured in this particular poll.
Yeah.
So if I had to sum all this up, I would say Muslim immigrants are blending in more than people think they are. And surveys are missing part of that story. They don't count the people who have changed the most. I want you to understand our country is so wonderful, so great. Our culture is so dynamic, so powerful, so potent that it is a solvent that actually causes people to become more Western, no matter who they are if they come here. And that includes Muslims.
The book that I mentioned earlier, 9 Parts of Desire.
Yes, you mentioned that off air, by the way.
Yeah, off air. That influence has been going on unmeasured and under the radar since maybe the 80s. So this cultural yeast is leavening Muslims around the world in very beautiful ways.
I like that. Yeast. That's a good analogy.
Okay, the 4th point, meet a Muslim.
Yeah, you know, I was talking with my son about this show, and he brought up Mark Twain. And Mark Twain has this quote, and I'm going to read it a word for word because I don't want to mess it up. He says, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts." And he wrote that all the way back in 1869. I still think it's true today. In fact, if I go a little bit further, he didn't stop there. He went on to say, "Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all of one's lifetime." I am not suggesting you need to go visit the Middle East. Quite the contrary. I think you should just go to the other side of town or to some major city, and you should make a Muslim friend. If you don't have immigrants in general in your life, the positions you're holding, chances are they're grounded in ignorance. The odds are just the Venn diagram on this thing is very, very profound. Knowing someone, this is to me the most important. Like people come to me and say, you know, I've done shows. I mean, we've made arguments. I don't believe most of those arguments change minds or hearts. I think the thing that changes human beings is when they know somebody physically, terrestrially, they can touch them. They've started to have affection for them. Maybe they're working with them. Maybe they have a friendship. Maybe they go to church together. They start to get to know this person, and that changes how they handle it. They look at the possibility of this person being deported right now under present times, and they'd be like, no, not that person. I'm thinking about all those other people, but not that person. It turns out that the most powerful argument you can make for any immigrant group is empathy. And it's relational empathy. It's being connected to a real human being who is of this group. Now, I know, Bill, that in your particular case, you are in California and you've interacted with a lot of people from various nations. That were not born here. Yeah. And even in the businesses that are some of the businesses that you frequented in Southern California. Do you want to add anything to this?
Well, just how amazing it is. I, like to patronize coffee shops. And before the pandemic, you could do that. And there were still places to sit and hang out. And one of our local chains was started by an Italian immigrant. Funny thing, Little Italy, San Diego, right? Who encouraged Italians to come and work for him on either student or work visas for a period of time, just to see how it was to be in America and to interact with Americans, and for his American customers to interact with the Italians who would come over. Well, he started reaching out, and he began to bring immigrants from Africa. One of those immigrants I got to know when he was a barista. He's now a business owner here with his wife and 2 kids in San Diego, a thriving business that's necessary, right? It's set right next to the Mexican consulate of all things. So he does a lot of that kind of consular business with notaries and things. And watching their family grow and expand is just the most joyous experience. And that's not an isolated case, Jim.
That's just one story. It's just one anecdote. It's just one connection, or actually you gave a couple connections there, but it's just a couple of them. But this matters. It changes your opinion. For me, it was all the way back in the early 90s, meeting a man by the name of Bier, who was from Africa, and going through what he'd gone through to become an American, and how much he treasured it in ways that I had not heard my fellow native-born friends and family speak, right?
Good
he
point.
had a
Right.
different
Right.
he had a different take that was really profound to me. Like, he saw things in my country I didn't see.
Yeah.
And our culture exports very well, but when people actually come here, they actually bathe in it. And when we have a chance to interact with those people, we find out that they're human beings just like us, and they find out we're not so bad either.
Yeah.
There's a saying, it says, when goods cross borders, armies don't, because it's bad to shoot your customers, right? Let's just be honest about it. But it's more than that. There's nothing that any ambassador can do that is as powerful as the 1,000 little relationships that are started by your friend who owned the restaurant. Bring some people over here, have people interact with them. Both sides interact with each other, and there's a richness of relationship that serves as a solvent that transcends it all. The number one solution to me is to get to know a Muslim.